So I have one of the more difficult jobs. I am giving a presentation after lunch where the blood is rushing to your stomach instead of your head. For some of you that may be a good thing, most of us it's not. The other thing is, Matt gave a presentation on humor. I always try to throw a little humor, but I'm not sure my humor always works. So he set a good standard. I'm not sure I can live up to that. And then we look at the Nature Conservancy pages, and we have a Facebook page, which I'm going to shamelessly promote. And we only have about 500 likes, so not the 4 million that Nature Conservancy had. So got some challenges today, but I was asked to come speak about engaging the public in science through research-based programs. We'll talk a little bit about that, and I've got 38 slides to go over in 15 minutes. I guarantee I won't get to those, but I'll try because I'm a scientist, right? So here's the outline of the talk. We'll talk about a lot of the work that I do with pollinator conservation and engaging the public in that. I'm an entomologist in doing science education research on East Campus, and so I have a personal interest in pollinators, and right now it's a great thing to be doing because there's a lot of interest in pollinator protection right now. We'll talk a little bit about how we engage folks in this science, and then talk about some studies we're doing associated with evaluating those projects and research around that. In the recent years, in the last 7-8 years, there's been a lot of public concern with protecting pollinators. I got started with this in the late 90s with my master's degree here at UNL in a project called bumbleboosters, where we were working with high schools across Nebraska doing bumblebee research. And when I worked with those projects, people would say, oh, great, bees, I'm going to get stung, or I'm allergic. Everybody was allergic to bees. That's not true, but everybody thinks they are, right? Because you get stung, you swell up, and all of a sudden you're allergic. And I used to hear that. Well, with an event that happened, first was discovered in 2008, something called colony collapse disorder in honeybees, where beekeepers came out to their hives in the spring of 2008, and they realized that they had super high losses in honeybee hives that they were managing. Anywhere from 40 to 70, 80% of their hives were lost to winter loss. And so there's a lot of research that's been going on with this. This is a continual problem throughout the United States. A lot of things they think are going on with that, but there's been a lot of news and information, popular culture information on honeybees and their conservation. One of the things I often hear with people is, how is the bee doing? And as an entomologist, I know there's 4,400 described species in North America alone. I take that as a great opportunity to work with misconceptions and hook people in to learning about science because they're interested in honeybees that when they come to our events. So we know there's a lot of other pollinator declines. Unfortunately, because there's not a ton of money associated with outside of honeybees for different research, monarch butterflies gotten a lot of attention here recently, and some of our bumblebees and other more charismatic pollinators. But if there's not money, it doesn't tend to get researched. So the question I always pose back to people is, first of all, there's a lot more bees, and then how do we know if they're declining or not? That's a real hard question to address. Because 1/3 of your food that you eat comes directly from bee pollination in the United States. A lot of that pollination is done by honeybees. We all have a personal connection to that. Unfortunately, I don't work a lot with honeybees. I try to work with natives and other things, so that's where my interest lies. But we use it as a way to hook people into these outreach projects. So, very hard to read slide, but there's a lot of things you can do to impact pollinator conservation. A lot of work that I'm interested in, because I'm a science educator, is the human side of this. So I will give you a speech, and you will promise me you will not go spray pesticides in your yard today when you go home to get rid of the crickets that are crawling into your house this time of year. But there's a lot of things that we can affect on the human side. A lot of this is human-caused issues with pollinator conservation. Destruction of habitat, reduction in native and other wildflowers that are food sources for things like bumblebees and honeybees. And then just a lot of other things. We have a lot of misconceptions about what to do when managing your landscapes. So we're interested with these projects in impacting people, teaching about the science. We want to increase science literacy, science understanding, which is like top of my goal for these projects. And then also eventually getting people to make behavior changes around the house, in their home landscape. And we're talking about agriculture here in the state of Nebraska. Corn, soybeans, wheat, and other major crops in landscape practices there. So we'll talk about one of these projects today called Bumbleboosters. But before we get to that, one of the things we're trying to figure out, and if I went around to the room, and if I could dissect your brain and somehow get it into a computer like they show in the movies, and figure out how much of your brain is tied to your knowledge of pollinators, my guess is for most folks it would be rather small. Because if you think about all the things you have to learn in life, knowledge for how pollination works, the system of pollination, isn't super high on the list, but a lot of the things associated with it certainly are. So understanding how science works, why we don't know what colony collapse disorder is exactly yet, or how to solve that problem or address that problem, is a part of that. But we know somewhere in your mind there's an information. We just don't know how big it is for pollination knowledge. And we'll get to a study where we're trying to do that here in a little bit. But there's a lot of things that go into it: science understanding, information literacy, which is a big topic for me, is like how literate our students are here on campus. And I'll show you some research about pollination literacy here in a second. Politics, agricultural practices, and conservation strategies, which is our ultimate goal, is tying to that. And I would recognize here, and you'll probably recognize some of these folks, if depending upon your role in society, everybody needs a different level of knowledge for pollinator conservation, pollinator systems thinking, in order to affect this problem in a positive way. And by the way, that's my family up there. If you're a university professor and you have a family, they get used a lot in your photos, right? So that's there. But you know, if we've got an entomologist up here, a farmer, all needs different bit of information to affect that problem, and I can't tell you what it is on an individual basis. Certainly we hope our people that are making the laws in our state and at the government level, national government level, have quite enough knowledge to make effective decisions, because they always do, right? That's a joke, okay? Hope there's no state legislatures in here. Okay. One of our projects that was actually my master's project 15 years ago was a project called Bumbleboosters. When I came back to UNL about 4 years ago, I wanted to relaunch Bumbleboosters under the umbrella, under the idea. This is sort of a nationally known project a number of years ago, one of the first sort of citizen science projects going with insects, and now there's many more with pollinators and all kinds of other insects. As a matter of fact, I think we've identified 170 across the country. And so I wanted to resurrect that, so to speak, and do a number of projects related with that. We've done a project with high school students putting out artificial bee boxes to attract bumblebee queens. I won't go into the whole biology of this, but the idea is you provide this habitat, you'll get more bumblebees nesting in your home landscapes. They actually battle for these sites. There's something about these rodent dens that they nest in that are very specific. By the way, this doesn't work very well, but we wanted to pose this question to non-scientists, because people that do this for a living can't figure it out. So I said, well, let's do this at some point. And I woke up 3 o'clock in the morning. I got out of my bed and said, oh, I'm going to do something on Kickstarter. I'm going to put this project on Kickstarter. And I thought I could get people to give about $20,000 to do bumblebee research. So I woke up, looked on Kickstarter, said, oh, most projects get funded between $4,000 and $6,000. Found a research paper some professors at Penn State did on this topic. And I had this posted by 3 o'clock. Before I hit the submit button, I said, I better ask somebody in sponsored programs whether I can even do this. Now, 6 weeks later, I got permission. That's all great. Not docking anybody in sponsored programs. It just takes a while to get things done sometimes. But it turns out we did get a lot of public funding for this. Well, we asked for $3,300. I got a check in the mail from just a guy here that owned a bunch of land in Nebraska that saw the project and said, I want to give you $2,000, which I can't believe. I just was like, wow, who's going to give me money for this? We ended up getting about $7,300. My graduate student Louise is here today, built 200 bee domiciles to distribute across the Northern Hemisphere, US, Canada, and a number of other countries. But the idea behind this is we would engage people in science and then look at the effects on them, their communities, in being involved in this project, and then if we're lucky, get the boxes to work. So we had 30 states involved. Here's some of the countries where we sent the boxes to. We shipped them all over. And bumblebees are sort of a northern hemisphere, mostly species, set of species. So, we're hitting those countries in the northern hemisphere for the most part. 170 domiciles went out. We gave a few others to schools locally. And addition, 125 people contacted us that we didn't give boxes to, because Louise spent like her first 3 months with me building by hand these awesome bumblebee boxes. Now, here's what works and what doesn't. We only got 33% of people reporting back to us out of multiple emails whether they even put the thing out. I said, I don't care if you didn't put them out. I don't care if you wasted the box and it's sitting in your house full of toys or whatever. I don't care. But that's all we could get people to report back to us, about 33%. We had a 1.6% success rate with those 33%, so about 2 accepted. However, one happened to be a gentleman, grad student from Dartmouth who's doing his research on this. He got it to work, so he's replicating that in his research. We'll see. I haven't heard this year whether it's worked or not. The other thing is people put out boxes. We let them modify the protocol. We didn't replicate because we didn't want to get into that because we don't, to build enough replicates to try this out, it's going to be hard for people. But we did have bumblebees' nests, like in this example, right next to the box, but not in the box. So what we did find out is, where they were nesting. A lot of that information wasn't known, so we're collecting and analyzing data on that right now. I have a grad student, so the idea is before she started, this would be a way to fund her, to give her a little bit of people, an audience to do her research on. And so what she's looking at is the impact and people involved in this project on communities and other folks. So our idea is we found out through Facebook and other things, people were talking to their communities, to their church groups about this project and getting them involved. And so she's interviewed a subset of them, and she's gone through, last time I talked to her about 4 of the interviews she's analyzed. And so I'm presenting Louise's research here a little bit today for her dissertation, but some of the results was their attitude changed from negative to positive to insects. If you're an entomologist, you're kind of a pariah in the science world or in the world in general. A lot of people think insects are gross. If you like spiders, probably the same thing, right? Or even worse. I have a wife that hates spiders, but she's okay with insects. I don't understand that mentality, okay? It's the same thing, basically. That's not the same thing. We get offended when we hear that. So their attitude change, employing scientific practices to pursue answers. They're using science, and they're making their own experiments. They're replicating. We had that group that we interviewed definitely did that. In their communities, assuming the role of experts, so people call them up anytime they have bees anywhere. They'll say, I got these bees in my driveway. How do I get rid of them? And then it's an opportunity for them to talk about pollinator conservation, things to do, not to do. And then they oftentimes will contact us to get the right answer, which is okay. Finding satisfaction in involvement in their involvement in this conservation project. Definitely are doing that, and so it's really, really cool. So they're also just talking to the public in interesting conversations. So through these interviews, we're getting this information back about their role in this project and the impacts on community. And so she's got a protocol. She's doing some follow-up work with looking at self-efficacy in science learning, and environmental action, and then we're doing some things like using the nature relatedness scale and attitudes towards the insects. We've got a number of things she's working on right now to look at the group as a whole and then pairing it with some other citizen science programs across the country. And so we're looking at getting further down through interviews and more qualitative work to see how it's impacting communities. That was sort of my goal before she started is, I know this is affecting people, but how do we track that? And so we'll eventually probably do a network analysis, a few other things. Like any other problem, like there's some more things you can ever possibly get done, so we're in the process of sorting that out in a realistic manner right now. Here's my shameless plug. We've got 500 likes on Facebook. Like us, Bumbleboosters is the Facebook page. Like us. We post things. Another thing we do with this, with social media, is we post twice a week. My student posts Monday, I post Friday, and we put information up about what we're doing in the community with pollinators, research that's up there, and it's our way to engage folks. We have people post and share and show us what they're doing in their communities, and we're looking at tracking that information to include as a part of her data analysis artifacts. And then one last thing before I finish up today. We just opened up last week. My group is doing on East Campus at the corner of 48th and Holdridge in the northwest corner behind the fence. You have to kind of know how to get there. But it's a pollinator garden and outdoor classroom. There are 4 sections to that. So it's about a ½ acre. That hive thing, if you look up in that corner, right, is all made of cedar, constructed by gentlemen that are on their way out of the state penitentiary. So they actually built that for job skills as part of a home building project. And it's really awesome. That's a native bee house. I have to find a way to fill those cavities full of native bee habitat every year. So please come help. It's 18 by 18, and it's going to be huge. But it's a cool way to engage the public. And we'll use that as a space to engage the public in this outdoor classroom, learning about science and engaging with pollinators. So with that, I have more slides I could show, but I think I'll end, and we'll take a few questions if we have time. Thank you.